Attractive individuals are all around us. Every day we are flooded with images of highly attractive men and women. But what impact does this exposure have on our own perceptions of attractiveness? In today's video, we're going to explore the different effects that stunning celebrities have on our self-esteem and how we perceive and evaluate individuals in our everyday lives. There is indeed an inflation of looks. Imagine yourself watching a show or looking at a recent edition of Vogue that features only exceptionally attractive men and women. Shortly afterwards, you're introduced to a new neighbor or a colleague who happens to be of, let's say, average physical attractiveness. You think your previous experience would affect your judgment of this person's attractiveness. As we spend more time being exposed to these images, our own perceptions of attractiveness become influenced. Even though there has been a noticeable trend towards diversity in recent years, advertisements, popular movies, and novels continue to show characters with above average levels of physical attractiveness, because that is what sells. This diversity is still not really diversity in physical beauty, it's just diversity by skin color, physical features, perhaps race or gender, but not actually by attractiveness. In addition, since in couture fashion we still see these characters conform to certain standards of beauty, it is still possible that cultural differences are obscured in favor of Western ideals. This implies that we become adapted to high levels of attractiveness by the Western standards, which can result in skewed, lower assessment of the beauty average of regular individuals in the real world, to the extent that even attractive individuals may be perceived as not so attractive anymore because we've just seen some extreme levels of physical beauty. And unsurprisingly, there is a lot of psychological research on this. Research by Kendrick and colleagues has shown that there is a phenomenon known as the contrast effect when it comes to judgments of physical attractiveness. According to their findings, our initial impressions of a potential dating partner can be negatively influenced if we've been recently exposed to posters, magazines, televisions, movies, what have you, featuring highly attractive individuals. As a result, our assessment of their attractiveness and their desirability as a potential dating partner becomes lower than what they would receive otherwise. And if you consider the opposite, say you're deployed on a military base somewhere out in a remote place with all men or all women, and you see no members of the opposite sex or the same sex depending on your preference, you would definitely get that army goggles, as they call it, where you would see those members that you're attracted to as more attractive than they would on the outside. Based on this research, if you have been previously exposed to an overwhelming number of attractive people, your brain may experience a reward overload. As a result, when you encounter a person of average attractiveness, you are less likely to experience rewards because of the adaptation to the high standards. Your dopamine sensors quite literally start to burn out. This can lead to a reduction in your visual attention towards the new person, displaying less friendliness and overall being more aloof or less interested in them. And moreover, you're also going to feel less inclined to seek future interactions with them because you're not as romantically interested. Interestingly, these effects are not only immediate but also chronic, meaning that individuals who are frequently exposed to mass media's perception of gorgeous celebrities or just gorgeous people in general, which is realistically all of us, we all tend to develop inflated standards of physical attractiveness. For individuals who are less physically attractive, this can lead to the adoption of unrealistically high standards and subsequent dissatisfaction with the individuals who are actually available to them. So in other words, being delusional about where you stand in the dating market. And you'd ask, does this phenomenon work in the opposite direction? Well, certainly. Indeed, exposure to individuals who are less physically attractive can enhance the perception of an average individual's attractiveness. Luckily, according to cognitive psychology, there may also be a flip side to these phenomena, where if media representations are perceived as belonging to a different category or a realm compared to real-life individuals, their beauty might be discounted and fail to influence judgments of non-media individuals. So for example, when you see attractive hominids, they're not really humans, in Avatar, the Pandorans, well, you're not going to really count their beauty standards as influencing your own. That makes sense. In other words, extremely attractive celebrities may be seen as unattainable. So for instance, looking at somebody like Madison Beer, who may or may not have had some work done, you would consider that, oh, that's just a celebrity effect, that's not a realistic beauty standard, and therefore their beauty can be excluded from your assessments of real-world attractiveness. Are these effects due to the fact that attractive individuals are more memorable, you may ask, and therefore they remain in our minds for longer? Are they considered more unique? Well, interestingly, attractive people are more likable but harder to distinguish from each other because they share greater facial morphological similarities. In other words, they're all attractive, they're the same type of person in a different font. And this is according to one such study by Light and colleagues among other papers. This finding is part of a broader phenomenon where category members who bear more resemblance to each other are perceived as more ordinary or typical, which is quite contradictory when you think about it, that the most attractive people actually tend to look more ordinary when compared to other attractive people, because they all have the same set of features, the same set of shapes, same amount of symmetry and height and clear skin and all of those markers that make somebody perhaps physically attractive. The authors of the study discovered a strong correlation between judgments of attractiveness and typicality, which refers to being ordinary. This contradicts the idea that highly attractive faces are quote-unquote unique and is connected to a concept we have explored in many of our videos called Coinophilia, or in plain English, averageness. More typical faces represent the average features of the population and are consequently perceived as more attractive. Therefore, more likable faces are typically more average and share greater similarities with each other, which makes them less unique and therefore less memorable. Of course, other research has also highlighted the fact that highly attractive faces tend to have at least one exceptional or non-average feature, but their face as a whole is usually quite high in normalcy or averageness when we're considering proportions, clear skin, the lack of tumors or malformations, the facial development, so on and so forth. So in summary, that is not the answer. More attractive faces are actually harder to remember. Unusual faces, which may be less attractive due to their lack of averageness or being less symmetric, are more memorable contradictorily. This is why a lot of fashion models may not necessarily possess that Prince Charming type of handsome, where they're harmonious type of features, but rather a more memorable, standout look with extreme levels of dimorphism and extreme feature, extreme proportions. Again, a common example would be somebody like Selena, who has a very wide nasal bridge, which also makes her face very striking. This also means models don't have, quote unquote, to be the most facially attractive type of people. Not all the effects of being bombarded with images of highly attractive people in the media are negative. There is a possibility that consumers can respond to these models by excelling in various tasks. Idealized models can serve as motivation for improved performance in areas beyond just attractiveness. In other words, real-world individuals seek to differentiate themselves from idealized celebrities by enhancing aspects such as their decision-making skills in everyday life. According to social psychology, upward comparisons can act as a source of inspiration and stimulate self-enhancement. I know personally, when I see a handsome male model, it encourages me to go to the gym and not miss a day. A study conducted by Sobel and colleagues found that the exposure to idealized advertising models leads to improved decision-making tasks driven by motivational processes. In other words, there is an unconscious desire to become better at something because you've seen somebody better than you at it. From a psychological perspective, individuals may experience a sense of failure when comparing themselves in terms of attractiveness. As a result, they may compensate by exerting greater effort to achieve other goals in their other aspects of life. In other words, individuals who feel dissatisfied with their status in one area can regulate their negative feelings by using it to fuel their performance in other areas. These effects are influenced by the self-discrepancies that arise from comparing oneself to an idealized model, leading to increased effort in demonstrating competence in other domains. And so with that being said, speaking of looks and attractiveness, if you do want to find out what you can do to change the way that you look, your facial aesthetic, what you can do to have a glow up in a very reasonable step-by-step way, then head over to the QOVES website and commission a report from our team of doctors and dentists and have them analyze and outline the steps that you can take to achieve a certain aesthetic, improve the way you look, or get a second opinion before you consider something drastic. As always, that's at the QOVES website, and I will catch you all in the next one.